In the shadowed halls of Ashbourne Manor, a renowned historian lies dead, a shattered hourglass spilling secrets across his desk. Hercule Poirot, the master detective, unravels a web of deceit woven by ambition and betrayal. A fiery scholar, a nervous student, and a polished curator. Each hides a motive, but only one holds the blade. From a forged Venetian goblet to a hidden frame stained with blood, every clue points to a desperate act to bury the truth. Can Poirot's little gray cells uncover the killer before time runs out? Dive into the broken hourglass, a tale of murder, mystery, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Chapter 1. The Silent Study. The autumn dusk settled over Ashbourne Manor, its ancient stones casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. Hercule Poirot, his patent leather shoes gleaming despite the muddy path, paused to survey the ivy-clad facade. His companion, Captain Arthur Hastings, bundled in a tweed overcoat, shivered beside him. "Dashed chilly for October, Poirot," Hastings muttered, his breath misting in the air. "What's this business Japs dragged us into?" Poirot's green eyes, sharp as cut emeralds, flickered with curiosity. "A historian, mon ami, found dead in his study. Inspector Japp speaks of foul play. We shall see what the little gray cells uncover." He adjusted his immaculate mustache, a ritual as precise as the ticking of a Swiss clock, and stepped toward the manor's oaken door. Inside, the air was thick with the musty perfume of old books and wax polish. A nervous maid, her apron twisted in her hands, led them through a labyrinth of corridors to the study of Dr. Reginald Hawthorne. The door creaked open, revealing a scene frozen in tragedy. Dr. Hawthorne, a wiry man in his 60s, lay slumped across his desk, his spectacles askew. A crimson stain bloomed across his waistcoat, stark against the scholarly clutter of manuscripts and inkwells. Beside him, an hourglass lay in ruins, its glass shattered, sand spilling like a golden wound across scattered papers. Hastings inhaled sharply. "Good heavens, Poirot!" Stabbed, and in his own study. Who could have done this? His voice echoed in the high-ceilinged room, where bookshelves loomed like silent sentinels. Poirot, unperturbed, circled the desk with the grace of a cat, his gloved hands clasped behind his back. "Patience, Hastings," he murmured. "The scene, it speaks. We must listen." He knelt beside the desk, his eyes darting over the details. The windows were locked, their heavy latches undisturbed. The bookshelves, laden with tomes on Venetian history, showed no signs of disruption. A single quill pen rested neatly in its stand, its nib unstained. Yet the hourglass, or what remained of it, drew Poirot's attention. The glass was shattered into jagged shards, but the wooden frame that should have held it was conspicuously absent. He touched a pinch of the spilled sand, rolling it between his fingers. "Curieux," he whispered. "This sand, it is not ordinary." Hastings, peering over his shoulder, frowned. "What's so special about it? Looks like plain sand to me." Poirot's lips twitched in a faint smile. "To you, perhaps, mon ami, but to Hercule Poirot it is a clue. Why break an hourglass? To destroy time itself? None. There is purpose here." The door swung open, admitting Inspector Japp, his face grim under his bowler hat. "Poirot, glad you're here. Nasty business, this. Dr. Hawthorne was knifed, clean through the heart. No weapon found yet, but we're searching the grounds." He gestured to the body. "Found just like this an hour ago by the butler. Door was locked from the inside, key still in the lock." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Locked, you say? And yet a murder. Most intriguing. He turned back to the desk, noting a half-finished letter in Hawthorne's precise hand, addressed to the Ashbourne Museum. The ink was dry, the words cut off mid-sentence. The authenticity must be questioned. Poirot's gaze lingered on the phrase, his mind already weaving threads of possibility. Japp cleared his throat. 3 people were in the manor this evening, besides the staff. Dr. Clara Wentworth, his colleague, bit of a row with Hawthorne over some academic matter. Miss Evelyn Marsh, his student, young thing, seemed upset by him lately. And Mr. Leonard Baxter, curator of the museum. They were all here for a lecture Hawthorne gave earlier. Any of them could have slipped in. Poirot nodded, his eyes still on the sand. And this hourglass, Inspector? It was dear to Doctor. Hawthorne. We? Japp shrugged. Obsessed with it, the staff say. Kept it locked in a case. Wouldn't let anyone touch it. Some antique from Venice, worth a fortune. Fortune, Poirot repeated softly, his fingers brushing the desk's edge. Or perhaps a secret. He straightened, his small frame radiating purpose. Come, Hastings, Japp. We shall meet these suspects. The hourglass is broken, but its truth remains. Hercule Poirot will find it. As they left the silent study, the spilled sand gleamed faintly in the lamplight, a mute witness to the crime. Outside, the wind howled, as if mourning the historian who would never finish his letter. Chapter 2. The 3 Suspects. The drawing room of Ashbourne Manor was a study Jinji system, study bathed in the soft glow of a chandelier and warmed by a crackling fire. Hercule Poirot stood near the hearth, his hands clasped behind his back, his sharp green eyes scanning the faces of the 3 individuals seated before him. Captain Arthur Hastings sat in a high-backed chair, his notebook open, though his pen hovered uncertainly, awaiting Poirot's lead. Inspector Japp, pacing near a mahogany table, muttered about the complexity of the case, his bowler hat resting on a sideboard. The air was thick with tension, the weight of Dr. Reginald Hawthorne's murder. Secondary to this, Hercule Poirot stood near the hearth, his hands clasped behind his back, his sharp green eyes scanning the faces of the 3 individuals seated before him. Captain Arthur Hastings sat in a high-backed chair, his notebook open, though his pen hovered uncertainly, awaiting Poirot's lead. Inspector Japp, pacing near a mahogany table, muttered about the complexity of the case, his bowler hat resting on a sideboard. The air was thick with tension, the weight of Dr. Reginald Hawthorne's murder in his locked study pressing heavily on the room. The 3 suspects, Dr. Clara Wentworth, Miss Evelyn Marsh, and Mr. Leonard Baxter, sat in a semicircle, each a study in guarded composure. Dr. Wentworth, a woman in her late 40s with steel-gray hair pinned tightly, sat ramrod straight, her lips a thin line of defiance. Miss Marsh, barely 20, clutched a handkerchief, her wide eyes darting nervously. Mr. Baxter, the curator, lounged with practiced ease, his tailored suit immaculate, though a faint sheen of perspiration betrayed his calm. Poirot, ever observant, noted the subtle tells. Wentworth's clenched fist, Marsh's trembling fingers, Baxter's too frequent adjustment of his cufflinks. Each had been in the manor that evening. Each had reason to resent the late historian, and each claimed innocence. The shattered hourglass, its sand spilled across Hawthorne's desk, lingered in Poirot's mind, a puzzle within a puzzle. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice smooth as velvet. "A crime has been committed, and the truth lies hidden among you. Hercule Poirot will uncover it. But first, I require your candor. Who shall speak first? His mustache twitched slightly, a silent signal of his focus. Jap cleared his throat. We've established the time of death, between 8 and 9 this evening, during or just after Dr. Hawthorne's lecture in the Great Hall. The study was locked, key inside, no sign of forced entry. The murder weapon, likely a knife, is missing. You three were here, and the staff saw no one else near the study. Let's start with where you were. Dr. Clara Wentworth spoke first, her voice clipped, academic precision in every syllable. I was in the library reading. Hawthorne and I disagreed on a manuscript's provenance, a professional matter, not personal. I left him alive after his lecture, around 8 o'clock. Her alibi was solitary, unverifiable, and her eyes flicked to the side when pressed about the exact time. Poi. Hourglass. It's sand not ordinary but laced with a rare pigment used in ancient forgeries. Why destroy it? He mused aloud, drawing curious glances from the suspects. Miss Evelyn Marsh went next, her voice quavering like a leaf in a storm. I was in the garden, sketching the roses. Dr. Hawthorne dismissed my thesis as derivative, but I'd never harm him. She produced a sketchbook, its pages filled with delicate charcoal drawings. One of the manor's rose garden dated that evening. Poirot examined it, noting the shadows in the drawing suggested a later hour than her stated timeline. Her cheeks flushed as she insisted she'd been alone, her story fragile as the glass now shattered in the study. Mr. Leonard Baxter leaned forward, his voice polished as his appearance. I was in the museum wing, cataloging artifacts. Hawthorne was a colleague, nothing more. We had no quarrel. Yet Poirot's keen eye caught the faint grains of sand on Baxter's polished shoes, an anomaly in the manor's pristine halls. When questioned, Baxter dismissed it as residue from handling the hourglass weeks prior, but his fingers lingered too long on his cufflinks, a nervous tick Poirot filed away. The drawing room grew quieter, the fires crackled the only sound as Poirot paced, his small frame commanding the space. The hourglass, mes amis, is no mere trinket. Dr. Hawthorne guarded it jealously, a Venetian relic of great value. Its destruction was deliberate, not accidental. What did it conceal? A secret worth killing for? His question hung unanswered, the suspects exchanging guarded looks. Hastings, scribbling notes, whispered, "They're all hiding something, Poirot." Wentworth's too defensive, Marsh's story doesn't add up, and Baxter's too smooth by half. Poirot nodded, his gray cells already sorting the threads of motive and opportunity. "Oui, Hastings. The hourglass is the key, but its secret is locked in their silence. We shall unlock it." Jap, retrieving his hat, prepared to search the manor further. "I'll have my men comb the grounds for that knife. Anything else, Poirot?" The detective paused, his eyes gleaming. "Examine the sand, Inspector. It is not what it seems, and the hourglass's wooden frame. Find it. It was not destroyed, only hidden." Jap nodded, accustomed to Poirot's cryptic directives, and left to organize the search. Poirot turned back to the suspects, his voice gentle but unyielding. "You may leave, for now, but know this. Hercule Poirot sees what is hidden. The truth, like time, cannot be stopped." As they filed out, Wentworth's shoulders stiff, Marsh's steps hesitant, and Baxter's stride too measured, Poirot stood by the fire, the image of the broken hourglass fixed in his mind. The sand, the pigment, the missing frame. They were pieces of a puzzle, and he would fit them together before the hour turned. Chapter 3. The Historian's Obsession. The morning light filtered through the leaded windows of Ashbourne Manor, casting geometric patterns across the polished floors. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in a charcoal suit, stood in the corridor outside Dr. Reginald Hawthorne's study, his gloved hands adjusting the brim of his hat. Captain Arthur Hastings, rubbing sleep from his eyes, joined him, a cup of tea in hand. "Early start, Poirot," he said, stifling a yawn. "What's the plan today? That Hourglass business is still nagging at me." Poirot's eyes gleamed with purpose. "The Hourglass, mon ami, is the heart of this affair. Dr. Hawthorne's death is no mere crime of passion. It is tied to his obsession. We must learn what he guarded so fiercely." He gestured toward the study door where a constable stood guard. "First, we speak with those who knew him best. The staff, they see what the grand do not." The manor's housekeeper, Mrs. Agnes Porter, a stout woman with a no-nonsense air, met them in the servants' hall. Her apron was starched to perfection, but her eyes were red-rimmed, betraying her grief for the late historian. "Dr. Hawthorne was a particular gentleman," she began, folding her hands. "Kept to himself, always in that study of his, poring over books and that peculiar hourglass. Wouldn't let anyone touch it, not even to dust." Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but probing. "This hourglass, Madame Porter, it was special to him, oui? What did he say of it?" Mrs. Porter frowned, recalling. "Said it was from Venice, 16th century, belonged to some alchemist. He'd lock it in a glass case, check it every day. Once caught young Tommy, the footman, eyeing it too close. Gave him a tongue lashing like I've never heard." Hastings scribbled in his notebook. "Sounds like he was protecting more than just a relic." Poirot nodded, his mustache twitching. "Précisément. And where was this case kept?" "In the study, by his desk," Mrs. Porter replied. "But it's gone now, case and all. Just the broken glass and sand left when they found him." Her voice wavered, and she dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. Poirot's gaze sharpened. "And who, madame, had access to the study?" Mrs. Porter hesitated. "Only Dr. Hawthorne had the key, but he'd let Dr. Wentworth or Mr. Baxter in for meetings. Miss Marsh, too, sometimes, though he was hard on her. The staff weren't allowed inside unless he was there." Thanking her, Poirot led Hastings to the butler, Mr. Clarence Finch, a wiry man with a perpetually furrowed brow. Finch confirmed the housekeeper's account, adding a detail that made Poirot pause. "Doctor, Hawthorne was agitated these last weeks," Finch said, polishing a silver tray with unnecessary vigor. "Kept muttering about forgeries and the truth coming out. Said the hourglass held a secret no one must know." "A secret?" Poirot's voice was a velvet trap. "Did he speak of this to anyone specific?" Finch shook his head. "Not that I heard, sir, but he and Mr. Baxter had words 2 days ago, in the study. Raised voices, something about the museum's collection. Couldn't catch it all through the door." Hastings glanced at Poirot. "Baxter again? That sand on his shoes? Think it's connected?" Poirot did not reply, but his eyes narrowed, filing the butler's words away like cards in a meticulous index. Their next stop was the Manor's library, where Dr. Hawthorne's lecture notes lay scattered on a lectern from the previous evening. Poirot examined them, his gloved fingers tracing the elegant script. The notes detailed Venetian trade routes with a curious emphasis on alchemical artifacts. A margin note, circled in ink, read, "Verify pigment authenticity. Hourglass critical." Poirot's lips curved slightly. "The pigment, Hastings. It is no coincidence." Inspector Japp joined them, his coat dusted with morning dew from overseeing the ground's search. "No sign of the knife yet, Poirot," he said, frustration etching his face. "But we found something odd in the ash heap behind the stables. Burnt scraps of wood. Looks like they might have been part of that hourglass frame. Too charred to be sure, but I've sent them for analysis." Poirot's eyes lit up. "Excellent, Inspector. The frame, it is not destroyed entirely, then. And the sand, have you tested it?" Japp nodded. "Lab's working on it. Preliminary report says it's mixed with something unusual, not just silica. They're rushing the results." As Japp departed to press the search, Poirot paced the library, his small frame dwarfed by towering bookshelves. Hawthorne's obsession was not mere sentiment, he murmured. This hourglass, it was a key to something greater, a truth he died to protect or expose. The pigment, the frame, the locked study, they form a pattern. Hastings, flipping through the lecture notes, frowned. "But what's the motive, Poirot? Wentworth's academic feud, Marsh's humiliation, Baxter's shady dealings, any of them could have snapped. And that locked door, how'd the killer get in and out?" Poirot stopped, his gaze distant. "The door, mon ami, is a distraction. The key was inside, oui, but keys can be turned from either side. The method is simple, the motive is complex. We must dig deeper into this Venetian relic. Its secret is the thread that binds our suspects." They returned to the study, where the constable allowed them entry. The room was as they'd left it, the air heavy with the scent of ink and tragedy. Poirot knelt by the desk, examining the spilled sand anew. He took a small vial from his pocket, scooping a sample with care. "This sand," he said softly, "it is not mere decoration. It holds a clue to the forger's art, or the historian's ruin." Hastings watched, puzzled. "Forger's art? You think Hawthorne was mixed up in something crooked?" Poirot rose, dusting his gloves. "Not crooked, perhaps, but dangerous. He sought truth, and truth can be a deadly pursuit. Come, Hastings, we must speak again with our suspects. Their secrets are like grains of sand, slipping through their fingers, but not through mine." As they left the study, the manor's clock chimed 10, each note a reminder of time's relentless march. Poirot's mind, however, was fixed on a different hourglass, one shattered yet speaking volumes to the detective who listened. Chapter 4. The Student's Secret. The rose garden of Ashbourne Manor lay bathed in the pale light of late morning, its blooms heavy with dew and the faint perfume of autumn. Hercule Poirot, his Homburg hat tilted precisely, strolled along the gravel path, his polished shoes crunching softly. Captain Arthur Hastings followed, his brow furrowed as he clutched a sketchbook borrowed from Miss Evelyn Marsh. "This garden's a fine spot for sketching, Poirot," he remarked, glancing at the roses. "But I can't shake the feeling that girl's hiding something. Her story about being out here during the murder, it's too convenient." Poirot paused beside a cluster of crimson blooms, his gloved fingers brushing a petal. "Convenient, oui, but not necessarily false, mon ami. Miss Marsh is young, impressionable, and frightened. Fear makes one conceal, but not always guilt. We must uncover what she saw, or heard." His green eyes, sharp as ever, flicked to the sketchbook in Hastings' hands. "Let us examine her work again. The truth, it hides in the details." They settled on a stone bench beneath an arbor, the sketchbook open between them. Miss Marsh's drawings were delicate, almost fragile, capturing the manor's gardens with a careful hand. The page she'd shown them, dated the evening of the murder, depicted the rose garden in charcoal, the shadows of the blooms stark against the paper. Poirot traced a finger over the lines, his mustache twitching. Regardez, Hastings. The shadows here, they fall long and sharp, as if drawn under moonlight, not the soft light of 8 o'clock. She claims she sketched at the time of the lecture, yet this suggests a later hour. Hastings leaned closer, squinting. By Jove, you're right. The sun would have been higher then. So she wasn't here when she said she was? Poirot's lips curved faintly. Perhaps, perhaps not. The sketch is truthful, but the time is not. Let us speak with Mademoiselle Marsh and see what her fear conceals. They found Evelyn Marsh in the Manor's conservatory, a glass-walled haven filled with ferns and orchids. She sat on a wicker chair, her hands twisting a damp handkerchief, her auburn hair escaping its pins. Her eyes, wide and shadowed, darted to Poirot as he approached, his demeanor gentle but unyielding. "Mademoiselle," he began, seating himself opposite her, "you are a talented artist, but your sketch, it tells a story you have not shared. The shadows in your drawing, they betray you. You were not in the garden at 8, were you?" Evelyn's face paled, her fingers tightening on the handkerchief. I don't know what you mean, Mr. Poirot. I was sketching, truly. I told you, I was upset after Dr. Hawthorne's lecture. He called my thesis childish, said I'd never amount to anything. I needed air, so I went to the garden. Poirot's gaze softened, but his voice held a quiet steel. And yet, mademoiselle, your drawing suggests you were there later, perhaps closer to 9, when Dr. Hawthorne met his end. What did you see? Or hear? The truth, it is your ally, not your enemy. Her lips trembled, and for a moment it seemed she might flee. Then, with a shuddering breath, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't lie, not entirely. I was in the garden, but I heard something. I'd gone to the study first to plead with Dr. Hawthorne about my thesis. I thought if I could explain, he'd reconsider. But when I reached the corridor, I heard voices, angry voices through the door. Hastings leaned forward, his pencil poised. Whose voices? Hawthorne, and who else? Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. Dr. Hawthorne and Mr. Baxter. They were arguing about an artifact, something about its authenticity. Dr. Hawthorne said, "You've gone too far, Leonard. I'll expose you." Mr. Baxter sounded furious, said it would ruin him. I was frightened. They didn't know I was there. I ran to the garden and started sketching to calm myself. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his gray cells weaving her words into the tapestry of the case. And this argument, mademoiselle, what time was it? Evelyn bit her lip. Just after 8, I think. The lecture had ended, and most guests were in the drawing room. I didn't stay long. I couldn't bear to hear more. Did you see anyone enter or leave the study? Poirot pressed, his tone gentle but insistent. Evelyn shook her head. No, I swear. I was too scared. I ran outside and stayed in the garden until the butler found me, after they found him. Her voice broke, and she buried her face in her handkerchief. Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings, who whispered, Baxter again, Poirot. That row with Hawthorne. It's damning. Poirot nodded, but his expression remained guarded. It is a thread, Hastings, but not the whole cloth. Mademoiselle Marsh has given us a piece of the puzzle, but her fear suggests she knows more than she says. We must tread carefully. He rose, offering Evelyn a courteous bow. Merci, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful. Rest now, but do not leave the manor. Hercule Poirot will have need of you again. As they left the conservatory, the scent of orchids clinging to the air, Hastings muttered, "She's terrified, but I don't think she's the killer." Baxter's looking guiltier by the minute, though. Poirot paused at the conservatory door, his gaze distant. "Do not be so quick, mon ami. Miss Marsh conceals, but not necessarily murder. Her youth, her humiliation, it makes her vulnerable, not guilty. Baxter's argument with Hawthorne is significant, but we lack the why. The hourglass, the pigment, the missing frame, they point to a deeper truth." They stepped into the corridor where Inspector Japp awaited, his face grim. "Poirot, the lab's got something on that sand. It's mixed with a rare pigment, Tyrian purple, used in ancient manuscripts and sometimes faked in artifacts. Hawthorne must have suspected a forgery." Poirot's eyes lit up. "Tyrian purple. Oui, Inspector, this confirms my suspicion. The hourglass was not merely a relic, it was evidence. But of what?" Japp scratched his chin. "Still no sign of that knife, but we're searching Baxter's quarters now. Those burnt wood scraps from the ash heap, they're definitely part of the hourglass frame. Same wood, same varnish. Someone tried to destroy it." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Not destroy, Inspector. Hide. The frame was too large to burn quickly. It is somewhere, and we shall find it." As they moved toward the museum wing, Poirot's mind churned. Evelyn's eavesdropping placed Baxter at the scene of a heated dispute, and the pigment linked the hourglass to a possible forgery. Yet the locked study, the missing knife, and Clara Wentworth's own motives remained shadows in the puzzle. "The student's secret is but one piece," Poirot murmured. "The historian's obsession, the curator's composure, the colleague's anger, they intertwine. Hercule Poirot will untangle them." The manor's clock struck noon, its chimes echoing through the halls. Time, like the sand in the broken hourglass, was slipping away, but Poirot's resolve was steadfast. The truth, he knew, was closer with every step. Chapter 5. The Curator's Composure. The museum wing of Ashbourne Manor gleamed with the quiet dignity of antiquity, its polished oak cabinets housing relics of bygone eras. Hercule Poirot, his small frame dwarfed by a towering display of Roman pottery, moved with deliberate grace, his keen eyes scanning the artifacts. Captain Arthur Hastings trailed behind, his tweed jacket slightly askew from their brisk walk through the manor's corridors. "This place gives me the creeps, Poirot," he muttered, eyeing a marble bust that seemed to stare back. "All these old things, and Baxter lording over them like some gatekeeper. That row Evelyn overheard makes you wonder what he's hiding." Poirot paused before a glass case containing a Venetian goblet, its intricate filigree catching the light. "Monsieur Baxter, mon ami, is a man of surfaces, polished, precise, but surfaces crack under pressure. We shall test his composure." His gloved finger tapped the air as if tracing an invisible thread. The hourglass, the pigment, the argument with Dr. Hawthorne, all point to this wing, to these artifacts. Let us see what our curator reveals. They found Leonard Baxter in his office, a compact room tucked behind the main gallery. The curator sat at a cluttered desk, cataloging a tray of ancient coins with a jeweler's loupe. His suit, tailored to perfection, contrasted with the faint sheen of sweat on his brow as he looked up. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," he greeted, his voice smooth as polished stone. "I trust you're making progress on this dreadful business?" He set the loupe down, his hands steady, though Poirot noted a slight tremor in his fingers as they adjusted a cufflink. Progress, Monsieur Baxter, is a matter of method, Poirot replied, seating himself opposite the curator. And method requires truth. You were seen in the study, arguing with Dr. Hawthorne shortly before his death. A witness overheard words of exposure and ruin. What precisely did you discuss? His green eyes locked onto Baxter's, unyielding as a spotlight. Baxter's smile faltered, but he recovered quickly, leaning back in his chair. A misunderstanding, Mr. Poirot. Reginald and I often debated the authenticity of artifacts. He was particular about his theories. We discussed a Venetian goblet, nothing more. I left him alive and well, cataloging here afterward. He gestured to the coins as if they were his alibi. Hastings, standing by the door, crossed his arms. Convenient, cataloging alone. No one to confirm that, eh? Baxter's eyes flicked to Hastings, a flash of irritation breaking his calm. The museum wing is my domain, Captain. I work late. Surely you don't suspect me of stabbing a colleague over a scholarly spat. Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint sign of his inner calculations. Not a spat, perhaps, but a secret. The hourglass, Monsieur Baxter. It was shattered, its frame missing. Yet I observe traces of sand on your shoes, sand that matches that in the study. You handled it recently, non? He leaned forward, his voice soft but piercing. And this sand, it contains Tyrian purple, a pigment linked to forgeries. What did Dr. Hawthorne know that threatened you? Baxter's composure wavered, his fingers tightening on a pen. Sand on my shoes? I handled the hourglass weeks ago, as I told you. Routine maintenance. As for this pigment, I know nothing of it. Hawthorne was paranoid, always chasing conspiracies. If he suspected a forgery, he never shared it with me. His tone was defiant, but Poirot noted the quick glance toward a locked cabinet in the corner. Paranoid, you say? Poirot rose, pacing slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. Yet he wrote of verifying authenticity, of the hourglass being critical. And you, monsieur, were heard speaking of ruin. A curious coincidence, non? He stopped, his gaze fixed on the cabinet. What do you keep there, I wonder? Papers, artifacts, or perhaps evidence? Baxter stood abruptly, his chair scraping the floor. That's preposterous. That cabinet holds private records, nothing more. You've no right to pry. His voice, though controlled, carried a sharp edge. Hastings whispered to Poirot. He's rattled, old man. That cabinet's worth a look. Poirot nodded, but his expression remained serene. For now, Monsieur Baxter, I pry only with questions. But the truth, it is like your coins. It bears marks that cannot be erased. We shall speak again. He turned to leave, then paused, as if struck by an afterthought. One thing more. The hourglass's frame. Wood, varnish, unmistakable. It was not burned entirely, was it? Where might one hide such a thing? Baxter's face paled, but he recovered with a forced laugh. I've no idea what you're talking about, Mr. Poirot. I'm a curator, not a carpenter. Poirot inclined his head, his smile enigmatic. Of course. Bonne journée, monsieur. As they left the museum wing, Hastings muttered, He's as slippery as an eel, Poirot. That sand on his shoes, the argument, the locked cabinet, it's all pointing to him. Poirot, walking briskly toward the manor's main hall, replied, Oui, but pointing is not proving. Baxter's composure is his armor, but it is cracking. The cabinet, the frame, the pigment, they are pieces of a mosaic. We must find the pattern. Inspector Japp met them in the hall, his face flushed with news. Poirot, we've got something. The lab confirmed the burnt wood from the ash heap matches the hourglass frame. Same oak, same varnish. But it's only fragments. The rest is still missing. And that pigment, Tyrian purple, it's rare, used in faked antiquities to mimic age. Hawthorne was onto something big. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Big, oui, and dangerous. The frame, Inspector, was hidden, not destroyed. Search the museum wing, Baxter's office, his cabinets. He is too careful, but not careful enough. Japp nodded, signaling a constable to organize the search. "Anything else?" he asked. Poirot paused, his mind racing. "The goblet, Inspector. The Venetian goblet in the museum. Have it tested for the same pigment. If it matches, we have our link." Japp scribbled a note, then hurried off, leaving Poirot and Hastings in the hall. Hastings rubbed his chin. "Baxter's in deep, Poirot. If that goblet's a fake, and Hawthorne knew, it's motive enough for murder." Poirot's gaze was distant, fixed on the chandelier above. "Motive, oui, but method remains. The locked study, the missing knife, the frame. Baxter is a man of order, yet this crime is chaotic. Is it his chaos or another's? The little gray cells, they work, Hastings." As they stepped into the crisp afternoon air, the Manor's clock chimed 1, its notes echoing across the grounds. Poirot's mind, like the clock, was relentless, piecing together the curator's composure, the historian's obsession, and the shattered hourglass. The truth, he knew, was buried in the details, and he would unearth it, grain by grain. Chapter 6. The Missing Frame. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Ashbourne Manor's study, where Hercule Poirot stood once more, his small, meticulous figure framed against the heavy oak desk. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and tragedy, the spilled sand from the shattered hourglass glinting faintly on the desk's surface. Captain Arthur Hastings hovered near the door, his face etched with impatience. "Back to the scene of the crime, Poirot," he said, glancing at the crimson stain where Dr. Reginald Hawthorne had met his end. "That missing frame's got to be the key. Baxter's looking guiltier by the hour, but how does it all fit?" Poirot's green eyes, sharp as a hawk's, roved over the room. "The frame, mon ami, is not merely missing. It is deliberately concealed. Its absence is as telling as its presence would be. Why destroy the glass and leave the sand, yet hide the wood? The answer lies in what the hourglass revealed." He knelt beside the desk, his gloved fingers sifting through the scattered grains. This sand, with its Tyrian purple pigment, was no ornament. It was evidence, and the frame, perhaps, was its keeper. Hastings frowned, adjusting his tie. "Evidence of what? That Venetian goblet Baxter authenticated. If it's a fake, and Hawthorne knew, that's motive enough. But the frame, why not burn it all?" Poirot rose, dusting his gloves with precision. "Because, Hastings, time was short. The killer acted in haste, smashing the glass to scatter the pigment. But the frame, it is bulky, distinct. To burn it completely would require a fire too conspicuous. No, it is hidden, and we shall find it." Inspector Japp entered, his boots heavy on the polished floor, a sheaf of papers in hand. "Poirot, the labs confirmed more on that sand. The Tyrian purple's a dead ringer for pigments used in forged artifacts, especially Venetian ones from the Renaissance. Hawthorne must have been testing it, maybe suspecting the goblet or something else in the museum." He tapped the papers. "Still no knife, though, and the search of Baxter's office turned up nothing but ledgers and dust. That frame's a ghost." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his mind at work. "A ghost, Inspector? Non, it is tangible, and it is near. The frame was not carried far, too risky in a manor full of eyes. Search again, but think smaller. A cupboard, a crate, a hollowed shelf. The killer is clever, but not invisible. Jap nodded, though his expression was skeptical. I'll have the lads check every nook. Anything else? Oui, Poirot said, his voice soft but commanding. The goblet. Test it at once. If it bears the same pigment, we have our link to Monsieur Baxter. And the study door, examine the lock again. A key inside does not mean a door was not breached. Jap scribbled a note and departed, leaving Poirot and Hastings in the silent study. Poirot circled the desk, his eyes lingering on the half-finished letter Hawthorne had left. The authenticity must be questioned. The words, cut off mid-sentence, seemed to pulse with intent. He tapped the paper lightly. Hawthorne was close to a revelation, Hastings. This letter, it was meant for the museum, perhaps for Baxter himself, a warning or a challenge. Hastings peered over his shoulder. A challenge that got him killed? Baxter's got the motive, and Evelyn heard them arguing. But the locked door, how'd he get out without being seen? Poirot's gaze drifted to the window, its heavy latch still secure. The door, the window, they are distractions. The method is simple when one sees clearly. The frame, however, is the clue we must pursue now. They left the study, Poirot leading the way to the museum wing, where the Venetian goblet stood in its glass case, its filigree gleaming like a taunt. Poirot studied it, his head tilted. Beautiful, no? Yet beauty can conceal deceit. If this goblet is a forgery, as the pigment suggests, Baxter's reputation hangs by a thread. Hawthorne's discovery would have unraveled him. Hastings rubbed his chin. So Baxter stabs him, smashes the hourglass to hide the pigment, and stashes the frame somewhere. But where? We've turned this place upside down. Poirot's eyes narrowed, scanning the gallery's shadows. Not upside down enough, mon ami. The frame is not far. Consider the killer's mind, pressed for time, needing a hiding place, close yet secure. They moved through the museum wing, Poirot's steps deliberate, his gaze darting to corners and crevices. He paused by a tall cabinet filled with minor artifacts, clay shards, bronze pins, nothing of note. Yet something caught his eye, a faint scuff on the floor, as if the cabinet had been shifted. Hastings, he said, his voice low, help me move this. Together, they eased the cabinet aside, revealing a narrow gap between it and the wall. There, wedged tightly, was a wooden frame, its oak surface scratched but unmistakable, traces of varnish matching Jap's burnt fragments. Hastings gasped. Good Lord, Poirot, the frame. How'd you know? Poirot's smile was modest. The little gray cells, Hastings. The killer hid it in haste, but not far from the crime. This cabinet, rarely opened, was a clever choice, but not clever enough. He examined the frame, noting faint smudges of the same golden sand from the study. And see, the sand clings to it. The pigment, it is here too. Jap, summoned by a constable, arrived breathless. Blimey, Poirot, you've done it. That's the frame, no doubt. We'll get it to the lab, check for prints and that pigment. Poirot nodded. Do so, Inspector. And mark this. The frame was hidden here, in Baxter's domain. His composure, it crumbles. As Jap's men secured the frame, Poirot stepped back, his mind racing. The frame's discovery tightened the net around Baxter, yet questions lingered. The locked study, the missing knife, Clara Wentworth's own motives, each was a thread in a tapestry not yet complete. The frame is found, Poirot murmured, but the picture it holds is still obscured. We must press on, Hastings. The truth is near. but it is slippery. The Manor's clock chimed 3, its notes a solemn reminder of time's passage. Poirot, undeterred, adjusted his hat and led Hastings back to the main hall, the weight of the case settling deeper into his gray cells. The hourglass, shattered but speaking, was guiding him closer to the killer's heart. Chapter 7. A Clash of Scholars. The library of Ashbourne Manor was a sanctuary of knowledge, its high shelves laden with leather-bound tomes, their spines gilded with age. Hercule Poirot stood near a long oak table, his gloved hands tracing the edge of a manuscript Dr. Reginald Hawthorne had been studying before his death. The air was heavy with the scent of vellum and wax, a faint dust motes dancing in the slanted light of late afternoon. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated nearby, flipped through a stack of Hawthorne's notes, his brow creased. "This place feels like a tomb, Poirot," he said, glancing at the shadowed corners. "That frame in Baxter's office, it's practically a confession. But what about Dr. Wentworth? She and Hawthorne were at daggers drawn over some manuscript. Could she be in on it?" Poirot's green eyes flickered with quiet intensity. "Dr. Wentworth, mon ami, is a woman of passion and pride, qualities that can lead to conflict, but not always to murder. Her clash with Hawthorne was intellectual, yet such clashes can mask deeper motives. We must test her steel." He turned to the manuscript, its pages filled with Hawthorne's precise annotations on a 15th-century Venetian text. A single underlined passage caught his eye. "The pigment betrays the lie." "This manuscript," Poirot murmured. "It was the root of their discord. Let us see what Dr. Wentworth reveals." They found Dr. Clara Wentworth in the Manor's parlor, a stark contrast to the library's gloom. The room was bright, its tall windows framing the autumn gardens, yet the atmosphere was taut as Clara sat rigidly, her gray hair pinned with military precision. Her hands, clasped tightly in her lap, betrayed a tremor as Poirot and Hastings entered. "Mr. Poirot," she greeted, her voice clipped but civil. "I assume you're here to accuse me further. I've told you, I was in the library during Reginald's lecture. I had no hand in his death." Poirot seated himself opposite her, his small frame radiating calm authority. "Accuse, madame? Non, I seek only the truth. You and Dr. Hawthorne quarreled over a manuscript, a Venetian text, oui? He accused you of plagiarism, a charge most grave for a scholar. Tell me, what was the nature of this dispute?" His tone was gentle, but his eyes were unrelenting, probing for cracks in her composure. Clara's lips tightened, a flash of anger crossing her face. "Reginald was insufferable," she said, her voice rising. "He claimed I'd stolen his research on a Venetian alchemical text, one tied to that wretched hourglass he obsessed over. I spent years studying those manuscripts. Mr. Poirot, years. My work was original, but he wouldn't hear it. He threatened to publish his accusations, to ruin my reputation." Her hands unclenched, then clenched again, as if grasping at her dignity. Hastings leaned forward, his notebook open. "Sounds like a motive to me, Doctor. Wentworth, if Hawthorne was about to expose you, that's reason enough to silence him." Clara's eyes blazed. "Silence him? I despised him, yes, but I'm no murderer. I was in the library reading when he was killed. I saw no one, heard nothing, until the butler's shout." Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of his calculations. "The library, madame, is not far from the study. A maid saw you in the corridor near the study door just after the lecture. You were not reading then, were you?" His voice was soft, but it cut like a blade. Clara's face paled, her breath catching. "The maid is mistaken," she said quickly. "I may have passed by, fetching a book. I don't recall, but I didn't enter the study, I swear it." Poirot rose, pacing slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. "And yet, madame, your memory falters at a critical moment. Let us consider the manuscript. Dr. Hawthorne believed it held a secret, linked to the hourglass and its Tyrian purple pigment. Did you know of this pigment, this marker of forgery?" Clara's eyes narrowed, but she shook her head. "I knew of his theories, wild theories about forgeries in the museum's collection. He was fixated on that hourglass, said it proved something about a Venetian artifact. I thought it nonsense." Hastings whispered to Poirot. "She's dodging, Poirot. If she knew about the pigment, she might have known what Hawthorne was onto." Poirot nodded, his gaze fixed on Clara. "And this artifact, madame, what was it? The Venetian goblet, perhaps, in Monsieur Baxter's care?" Clara hesitated, then shrugged. "Possibly. Reginald never said directly. He was secretive, paranoid. If he suspected a forgery, he'd have told Baxter, not me." Poirot's eyes gleamed, catching the faint crack in her story. "Paranoid, oui, but precise. His notes mention the pigment explicitly, tied to the hourglass. And you, a scholar of Venetian texts, would know of Tyrian purple's use in forgeries. Did you not suspect what he was uncovering?" Clara's hands trembled, but her voice held firm. "I suspected nothing. I was concerned with my own work, not his delusions." Inspector Japp appeared at the parlor door, his face flushed from the ongoing search. "Poirot, a word," he said, gesturing outside. They stepped into the corridor where Japp lowered his voice. "The frame you found, it's got traces of the same pigment, Tyrian purple, and a smudge of oil, like from a glove. No prints, though. And the goblet's being tested now, results by tomorrow. But here's the kicker. A footman saw Wentworth lingering near the study, not just passing by. She was there longer than she's letting on." Poirot's eyes lit up. "Formidable, Inspector. The footman's account tightens the net. Dr. Wentworth conceals her movements, but why? To protect herself or another?" Japp shrugged. "Could be either. She's got motive. Hawthorne's plagiarism charge was a career ender, but Baxter's still my bet with that. Frame in his office." Returning to the parlor, Poirot fixed Clara with a steady gaze. "Madame, a witness places you near the study longer than you admit. Why were you there, if not to confront Dr. Hawthorne?" Clara's composure cracked, her voice rising. "I told you, I was fetching a book. I may have paused, thinking of speaking to him, but I didn't. I couldn't face another argument. You must believe me." Poirot inclined his head, his expression unreadable. "Belief, madame, is earned by truth. For now, remain here. Hercule Poirot sees what is hidden, and the shadows of this case are clearing." As they left the parlor, Hastings muttered, "She's lying, Poirot." That pause by the study. It's suspicious as anything, but Baxter's still got the frame and the sand on his shoes. Poirot paused in the hall, his mind a whirl of connections. "Oui, Hastings, but lies are not always murder. Dr. Wentworth's pride is wounded, her career threatened, yet her anger feels academic. Baxter's motive is deeper, tied to the goblet and the frame. The clash of scholars reveals much, but the hourglass holds the final truth." The Manor's clock struck 4, its chimes a solemn underscore to Poirot's resolve. The pieces were aligning, But the puzzle was not yet complete. Chapter 8. The Sketch in Question. The conservatory of Ashbourne Manor glowed with the soft light of dusk, its glass walls reflecting the fading hues of the autumn sky. Hercule Poirot stood beside a potted fern, his small, neat figure as composed as ever, his gloved hands holding Miss Evelyn Marsh's sketchbook. The delicate charcoal drawing of the rose garden, its shadows betraying a later hour than claimed, lay open before him. Captain Arthur Hastings, leaning against a wicker table, tapped his pencil against his notebook. "That sketch, Poirot," he said, his voice low. "It's proof Evelyn wasn't where she said she was. Those shadows, moonlight, not evening light. She's covering something. But is it murder?" Poirot's green eyes, sharp and unyielding, traced the sketch's lines. "The sketch, mon ami, is both truth and deception. Mademoiselle Marsh drew what she saw, but not when she claims. Her fear, it cloaks a secret, not necessarily of blood, but of knowledge. We must unravel what she witnessed." He closed the sketchbook with a gentle snap, his mustache twitching as his gray cells churned. They found Evelyn in the Manor's drawing room, seated near a crackling fire, her auburn hair loose and her hands fidgeting with a frayed ribbon. Her eyes, wide with anxiety, darted to Poirot as he entered, her posture stiffening. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice trembling, "have you found who killed Dr. Hawthorne? I've told you everything I know." The plea in her tone was earnest, but Poirot noted the quick glance toward the window, as if she longed to flee. He seated himself opposite her, placing the sketchbook on the table between them. "Everything, mademoiselle." "No, I think not. Your drawing of the rose garden is exquisite, but its shadows betray you. They speak of moonlight, not the twilight of 8 o'clock. You were not sketching when Dr. Hawthorne was killed, were you?" His voice was soft, almost fatherly, but his gaze pinned her like a butterfly to a board. Evelyn's cheeks flushed, her fingers twisting the ribbon into knots. I don't understand. I was in the garden, sketching. I told you, I heard Dr. Hawthorne and Mr. Baxter arguing, and I ran outside. I needed to clear my head." Her words tumbled out, too quick, too rehearsed. Hastings, standing by the fireplace, cleared his throat. "Come now, Miss Marsh. The shadows don't lie, even if you might. You were in the garden later, closer to 9, when the murder happened. What were you really doing?" His tone was firm, but not unkind, his years with Poirot tempering his impatience. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, her resolve crumbling. "All right," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I wasn't sketching then. I did go to the garden, but not until after I heard more. I didn't tell you everything because I was scared." She paused, swallowing hard, then continued. "When I overheard Dr. Hawthorne and Mr. Baxter arguing, it wasn't just about an artifact. Dr. Hawthorne said something about a forged goblet and how it would ruin the museum's reputation. Mr. Baxter was furious. He said, 'You'll destroy everything I've built.' I didn't know what to do, so I slipped away to the garden." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "And this argument, mademoiselle, you heard it through the study door. Did you see anyone enter or leave?" Evelyn shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "No, I swear. I only heard them, then I ran. I was in the garden by 9, sketching to calm myself. I didn't see anything else, but I was afraid Mr. Baxter might know I'd heard. He looked at me oddly later, at the lecture's end." Hastings scribbled furiously, muttering, "Baxter again, Poirot." That's twice she's placed him at the scene, and with a motive to boot. The goblet, the hourglass, it's all coming together. Poirot nodded, but his expression remained guarded. Oui, Hastings, but Mademoiselle Marsh's fear is a puzzle. She hides to protect herself, but from what? Guilt or merely knowledge? He turned back to Evelyn, his voice gentle but insistent. Mademoiselle, you say Monsieur Baxter looked at you oddly. Describe this look. Evelyn hesitated, her fingers stilling on the ribbon. It was cold, like he was sizing me up. It was after the lecture, when we were all in the drawing room. I'd just come in from the garden, and he was standing by the door, watching me. I thought maybe he knew I'd been near the study. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his mind weaving connections. And this sketch, you drew it to prove you were in the garden, oui? To cover your eavesdropping? Evelyn nodded, her face flushed with shame. Yes, I was afraid if I admitted I'd heard them, I'd be in trouble. I didn't know Dr. Hawthorne was dead until the butler found him. Poirot rose, pacing slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. Your fear, mademoiselle, is understandable, but it has clouded the truth. You have given us a vital piece, the goblet, a forgery, and Monsieur Baxter's fear of ruin. But tell me, did you hear anything else? Footsteps, a door, a cry? Evelyn shook her head, her voice barely audible. Nothing, just their voices, then silence. I ran to the garden and stayed there. As Poirot and Hastings left the drawing room, Inspector Japp met them in the corridor, his face grim with new findings. Poirot, the goblet's results are in. Traces of Tyrian purple, same as the hourglass sand. It's a fake, no question. Hawthorne was right, and we found a glove in the museum wing near Baxter's office with a smudge of that same pigment. No prints, but it's damning. Poirot's eyes lit up. Formidable, Inspector. The goblet, the glove, the frame, all point to Monsieur Baxter. Yet the study's lock, the missing knife, these remain. Mademoiselle Marsh has confirmed his motive, but the method, it eludes us still. Japp nodded, rubbing his chin. We're searching Baxter's quarters again. If that knife's there, we'll have him. Hastings, trailing behind, whispered, Evelyn's story seals it, Poirot. Baxter's the man, arguing with Hawthorne, caught with the frame, and now the goblet's a fake. But how'd he manage the locked door? Poirot's gaze was distant, fixed on the manor's grand staircase. The door, Hastings, is a trick of the mind. The key was inside, oui, but keys turn both ways. The sketch in question has clarified Baxter's motive, but the hourglass holds the final secret. The manor's clock struck 6, its chimes echoing through the halls. Poirot, undeterred, adjusted his cufflinks, his mind a whirl of connections. Evelyn's sketch, flawed but revealing, had tightened the net around Baxter, but the truth, like the sand in the broken hourglass, was still slipping through the cracks. Chapter 9. The Curator's Motive. The museum wing of Ashbourne Manor lay steeped in twilight, its artifacts casting eerie shadows across the polished floors. Hercule Poirot, his small frame silhouetted against a display of Venetian glass, stood motionless, his green eyes fixed on the forged goblet in its case. The confirmation of its Tyrian purple pigment, identical to that in the shattered hourglass, had tightened the web around Leonard Baxter, yet Poirot's mind churned with unanswered questions. Captain Arthur Hastings, pacing nearby, adjusted his tie with a restless tug. "It's all coming together, Poirot," he said, his voice low. "Baxter's argument with Hawthorne, the frame in his office, that glove with the pigment, he's our man. But how did he pull it off with the study locked? Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint signal of his inner calculations. Monsieur Baxter, mon ami, is a man of ambition, cloaked in composure. The goblet, a forgery he authenticated, was his triumph, until Dr. Hawthorne threatened to expose it. Motive, oui, but the method remains elusive. We must press him, Hastings, until the cracks in his facade break wide. He turned from the goblet, his gaze sweeping the gallery. The hourglass, its frame, the pigment, they are the threads. Let us pull them taut. They found Leonard Baxter in the Manor's dining hall, where a late tea was being served to the remaining guests. Baxter sat alone at the long mahogany table, his tailored suit as impeccable as ever, though his fingers betrayed a nervous rhythm as they stirred his tea. The clink of the spoon against porcelain was the only sound as Poirot and Hastings approached. "Monsieur Baxter," Poirot began, seating himself with deliberate grace, "we must speak again. The net of truth tightens, and you are at its center." Baxter's smile was tight, his eyes wary. "Mr. Poirot, I've told you all I know. I was cataloging artifacts during Reginald's lecture. I had no part in his death." His voice was smooth, but Poirot noted the faint tightening of his jaw, the too precise adjustment of his cufflinks. Hastings, standing with his arms crossed, snorted softly. "Cataloging, was it? With sand from that hourglass on your shoes, and the frame hidden in your office? Come off it, Baxter. You were arguing with Hawthorne about a forged goblet. He was going to ruin you." Baxter's composure flickered, a flush rising to his cheeks. "Sand? A trace from weeks ago. As I said, the frame? I know nothing of it. And this goblet nonsense. Reginald was paranoid, seeing forgeries everywhere." Poirot leaned forward, his voice Tweed-Lee system. Voice soft but piercing. "Paranoid perhaps, Monsieur Baxter, but correct. The goblet in your care contains Tyrian purple, the same pigment as the hourglass sand. Dr. Hawthorne suspected it was a forgery, did he not? And you, as its authenticator, stood to lose everything if he exposed you." Baxter's hand froze on his teacup, his knuckles whitening. "That's absurd. I authenticated the goblet in good faith. If it's a fake, I was deceived as well." Poirot's eyes gleamed, unrelenting. "Deceived or deceptive? The hourglass frame found in your office bore the same pigment. A glove with matching traces was nearby. And a witness heard you argue with Hawthorne, threatening ruin. You denied this argument, yet the evidence mounts." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Why, monsieur, did you hide the frame if you were innocent?" Baxter's composure cracked, his voice rising. "I didn't hide anything. Someone must have placed it there to frame me. I'm a curator, not a murderer." His eyes darted to the door, as if calculating an escape. Hastings whispered to Poirot, "He's sweating, Poirot. He's cornered, and he knows it." Poirot rose, pacing slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. "Cornered, oui, but clever. Let us consider, Monsieur Baxter. You authenticated a forged goblet, a jewel of your collection. Hawthorne's discovery threatened your reputation, your position. You argued with him, perhaps in the heat of anger. The hourglass, with its telltale pigment, was destroyed to conceal the truth. The frame, too large to burn quickly, was hidden in your office. A tidy plan, but not tidy enough." Baxter slammed his cup down, the porcelain rattling. "This is outrageous. I won't sit here and be accused without proof. You've no evidence I was in the study when he died. The door was locked, the key inside. How could I have done it?" His voice was steady, but his hands trembled, betraying his fear. Poirot stopped, his gaze piercing. "The door, monsieur, is no mystery. A key can be turned from either side or a duplicate used. The method is simple. The motive is not. You stood to lose your career, your honor. Is that not worth a desperate act?" Baxter's face drained of color, but he shook his head. "I'm innocent, Poirot. You're chasing shadows." Inspector Japp entered, his face grim with purpose. "Poirot, we've got more. The glove's oil matches a type Baxter uses for artifact preservation, and the goblet's pigment analysis, identical to the Hourglass. It's a slam dunk." Baxter's eyes widened, his composure shattering. "This is a setup. Someone's framing me. Wentworth, maybe. She hated Reginald, wanted his place." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Doctor, Wentworth, we had her own grievances, but the evidence points to you. The sand on your shoes, the frame in your office, the glove. Too many coincidences, non?" He leaned closer, his voice a velvet blade. "Confess, monsieur. The truth is lighter than the burden of lies." Baxter stood, his chair scraping back. "I won't confess to something I didn't do. You've got nothing but guesses." He stormed out, leaving his tea untouched. Japp sighed. "He's tough, Poirot. We've got no knife, no witnesses to the act. Can we pin it on him?" Poirot's gaze was distant, fixed on the empty chair. "We are close, Inspector. The motive is clear. Baxter's ruin was at stake. The frame, the glove, the pigment, they are damning. But the knife, the lock, they hold the final key." Hastings muttered, "He's guilty as sin, Poirot. But he's right about one thing. How'd he get out of that locked room?" Poirot turned, his eyes alight. "The locked room, Hastings, is a puzzle of simplicity. The key was inside, oui, but a second key or a clever trick could explain it. We must find the knife, and the truth will follow." As they left the dining hall, the manor's clock struck 7, its chimes a solemn reminder of the ticking truth. Baxter's motive was laid bare, but Poirot's gray cells were restless, seeking the final piece of the deadly mosaic. Chapter 10. The Hidden Frame. The twilight shadows deepened over Ashbourne Manor, cloaking its ancient halls in a somber hush. Hercule Poirot stood in the museum wing, his meticulous figure illuminated by the faint glow of a brass lamp. The wooden frame of the shattered hourglass, recently uncovered behind a cabinet, lay on a nearby table, its oak surface scratched but intact, smudged with traces of Tyrian purple pigment. Captain Arthur Hastings, his face etched with anticipation, stood beside him, rubbing his hands together. "This frame seals it, Poirot," he said, his voice low but eager. "Found in Baxter's office, with that pigment. It's practically a signed confession. But how does it fit with the locked study? That's the sticking point." Poirot's green eyes gleamed, his gloved fingers brushing the frame's edge. "The frame, mon ami, is not a confession, but a cornerstone. It was hidden, not destroyed, because time betrayed the killer. The hourglass was smashed to scatter the pigment, to obscure its link to the forged goblet. But the frame, too large, too distinct, was concealed in haste. Its discovery in Monsieur Baxter's domain is no accident." He paused, his mustache twitching. "Yet the locked study, the missing knife, these are the final threads. We must weave them together." Inspector Japp bustled into the room, his coat dusted with evening dew, a sheaf of papers in hand. "Poirot, we've got more on that frame," he announced, his voice brisk. "The lab confirms the pigment matches the goblet and the sand. Tyrian purple, no doubt. And there's a trace of blood, faint but there, on the frame's edge. It's Hawthorne's. The killer must have handled it after the stabbing. He shook his head. Still no knife, though. We've torn Baxter's quarters apart. Nothing. Poirot's eyes lit up, his mind racing. Blood, Inspector? Formidable. The frame was not merely hidden. It was touched in the act of murder. The killer, in haste, smeared it with Hawthorne's blood, then hid it where we found it. He turned to the frame, examining it anew. A faint scratch, barely visible, ran along one corner, as if it had been forced into a tight space. "This scratch," he murmured. "It tells of urgency, of a plan interrupted." The cabinet was a temporary refuge, but why here, in the museum wing? Hastings frowned, pacing the room. "Because Baxter's the killer, that's why. He stabbed Hawthorne, smashed the hourglass to hide the pigment, and stashed the frame in his own office. Risky, but maybe he thought no one would look there." Poirot nodded, but his expression was guarded. "Risky, oui, but deliberate. Baxter is a man of order, yet this crime is chaotic. The frame's hiding place suggests panic, not planning. We must test this." They moved to Baxter's office, a compact space now in disarray from Japp's search. The locked cabinet, previously noted by Poirot, stood open, its contents, ledgers, artifact records, and a few minor relics strewn across the desk. Poirot's gaze swept the room, lingering on a small waste bin in the corner. He knelt, sifting through its contents with gloved hands, and extracted a torn scrap of paper, its edge singed. The fragment bore a single word in Hawthorne's precise hand. "Forged." Hastings leaned over, his eyes widening. "Good Lord, Poirot, that's Hawthorne's writing. Was he drafting a note about the goblet?" Poirot's lips curved faintly. "Perhaps, Hastings. This scrap, discarded and burned, suggests the killer sought to destroy more than the hourglass. But why leave it here, in Baxter's domain? To incriminate him, or because he is the culprit?" Japp, inspecting the cabinet, called out, "Poirot, take a look at this." He pointed to a hidden compartment, revealed when a panel was pressed. Inside lay a small vial of oil, the same type found on the glove smudged with pigment. "This oil," Japp said, "matches the glove and the frame. Baxter's been using it for artifact preservation. It's another nail in his coffin." Poirot's mustache twitched, his gray cells aligning the clues. "The oil, the glove, the frame, the pigment, all circle Monsieur Baxter. Yet the knife, Inspector, it eludes us. Without it, the picture is incomplete." He turned to the waste bin, his mind churning. "This scrap of paper, it is a clue to Hawthorne's final act. He was writing, perhaps to expose the forgery, when death came. The killer acted swiftly, but not swiftly enough to erase all traces." They left the office, Poirot leading the way to the manor's great hall, where a portrait of a stern-faced ancestor glowered down. He paused, his hands clasped behind his back. "Consider, mes amis, the sequence. Hawthorne argues with Baxter about the goblet. He writes of forgery, perhaps to alert the museum. The killer strikes, stabs him, smashes the hourglass to scatter the damning pigment. The frame, too large to destroy quickly, is hidden in the museum wing. The glove, the oil, the blood, they point to Baxter. But the locked study? How?" Hastings rubbed his chin. "A duplicate key, maybe, or some trick with the lock. Baxter's clever enough to pull it off." Poirot nodded, but his eyes were distant. "Possible, Hastings, but too simple. The lock was untouched, the key inside. The killer needed no trick, only opportunity. The frame's hiding place suggests proximity. The museum wing is steps from the study. Baxter's motive is clear, but we must confirm his means. Japp, following behind, added, "We're watching Baxter like a hawk. He's not leaving the manor. If that knife's here, we'll find it." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Search the gardens, Inspector, near the study's window. A knife is small, easily tossed in haste, and question the staff. Again, someone saw movement, perhaps without knowing its significance." As they reached the hall's grand staircase, Poirot paused, his mind a whirl of connections. The hidden frame, Hastings, is the killer's mistake. It ties the crime to the museum, to Baxter, to the goblet. But Dr. Wentworth's anger, Miss Marsh's fear, they linger in the shadows. The truth is near, but it requires one final push. The manor's clock struck 8, its chimes echoing like a heartbeat. Poirot adjusted his hat, his resolve unbroken. The frame was found, but the killer's heart remained hidden, though not for long. Chapter 11. The Confession. The grand drawing-room of Ashbourne Manor was bathed in the soft glow of lamplight, its heavy drapes drawn against the chill of the late October evening. Hercule Poirot stood by the fireplace, his small, meticulous figure commanding the space despite the vastness of the room. The crackle of logs was the only sound as Captain Arthur Hastings, seated in a velvet armchair, watched with bated breath. Inspector Japp stood near the door, his arms crossed, his face taut with anticipation. Before them sat Leonard Baxter, the curator, his tailored suit slightly rumpled, his composure fraying like a worn tapestry. The hourglass frame, the forged goblet, the glove smudged with Tyrian purple, all pointed to him, and Poirot's gray cells had woven the threads into a noose. "Monsieur Baxter," Poirot began, his voice smooth as polished marble, "the time for pretense is over. The evidence is formidable. The hourglass frame hidden in your office, the glove with your preservation oil, the sand on your shoes, the forged goblet you authenticated. Dr. Hawthorne threatened to expose your deceit, and you silenced him. Confess, and let the truth lighten your burden." His green eyes locked onto Baxter's, unyielding as a judge's gavel. Baxter's hands clenched on the arms of his chair, his knuckles white. "This is madness, Poirot," he said, his voice strained but defiant. "I've told you, I was cataloging artifacts during the lecture. I didn't kill Reginald. Someone's framing me. Wentworth, perhaps, or that sniveling student, Marsh." His eyes darted to Japp, seeking an ally, but found only the inspector's grim stare. Hastings leaned forward, his notebook forgotten. "Come off it, Baxter. Evelyn heard you arguing with Hawthorne about the goblet. You said his exposure would ruin you. And that frame tucked behind your cabinet, it's got his blood on it." Baxter's face paled, but he shook his head. "I didn't put it there. Someone's trying to pin this on me. I'm no murderer." Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, the firelight casting his shadow long and sharp. "Let us reconstruct, monsieur. Dr. Hawthorne, a meticulous scholar, discovered the goblet you authenticated was a forgery, its Tyrian purple pigment matching the hourglass sand. He confronted you, threatening to reveal your fraud to the museum board. Your career, your reputation, poof, gone. In a moment of desperation, you acted." He paused, turning to face Baxter. "You entered the study after the lecture, perhaps under pretense of discussion. A knife, small and sharp, was your weapon. One thrust, and Hawthorne was dead." Baxter's breath hitched, his eyes wide. "No, I never." Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "You smashed the hourglass to scatter the damning pigment, hoping to obscure its link to the goblet. The frame, too large to destroy quickly, you hid in your office, behind the cabinet. A panicked choice. The glove, stained with oil and pigment, you discarded nearby. But the study's lock, it troubles you, oui? You turned the key from inside, then slipped out, perhaps through a window left unlatched, tossing the knife into the garden. Japp stepped forward, his voice gruff. "We found the knife, Poirot, in the rose garden, under a bush. Blood on the blade. Hawthorns. No prints, but it's a match for the wound." Baxter's shoulders slumped, his defiance crumbling. "A knife?" he whispered. I couldn't." Poirot's voice softened, but his gaze remained relentless. "You could, monsieur, and you did. The sand on your shoes, the blood on the frame, the glove's oil, all yours. Miss Marsh heard your anger, Doctor. Wentworth saw your ambition. The hourglass, it was your undoing. Its pigment betrayed your forgery, as it betrayed your crime." He leaned closer, his tone almost compassionate. "Confess, Monsieur Baxter, the truth is heavy, but silence is heavier." Baxter's head dropped into his hands, a broken sob escaping. "I didn't mean to kill him," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "It was an accident. Reginald was going to report the goblet, said it would ruin the museum, ruin me. I went to his study to reason with him, but he wouldn't listen. He waved that knife, a letter opener, shouting about ethics. I grabbed it in a panic and... It happened so fast. He fell, bleeding. I smashed the hourglass to hide the pigment, hid the frame, threw the knife out the window. I thought I could cover it up." Hastings gasped, his pencil clattering to the floor. "Good Lord, Poirot, you've done it. He's confessed." Japp moved forward, his handcuffs ready. "Leonard Baxter, you're under arrest for the murder of Dr. Reginald Hawthorne." Baxter offered no resistance, his face ashen as Japp led him away. Poirot stood by the fire, his expression somber. "A triumph, Hastings?" he said softly, responding to his friend's earlier words. "No, it is no triumph when a life is lost. Baxter's ambition consumed him, and the hourglass marked his fall." Hastings rose, shaking his head. "But the locked door, Poirot. How did he do it?" Poirot's lips curved faintly. "Simplicity, mon ami. The window was unlatched, just enough to allow exit. He turned the key inside, climbed out, and closed it behind him. The knife, tossed into the garden, was his final mistake. The little gray cells, they see what is plain when one looks closely." As the fire crackled, the manor's clock struck 9, its chimes a mournful echo. The case was nearly closed, but Poirot's mind lingered on the broken hourglass, its sand a silent witness to a scholar's end and a curator's ruin. Chapter 12. The Final Piece. The drawing room of Ashbourne Manor was hushed, its heavy drapes softening the morning light that filtered through the tall windows. Hercule Poirot stood at the center, his small, immaculate figure radiating quiet authority, his gloved hands clasped behind his back. Before him sat Doctor Clara Wentworth and Miss Evelyn Marsh, their faces a study in contrast, Clara's stern and guarded, Evelyn's pale and apprehensive. Captain Arthur Hastings lounged in a corner armchair, his notebook closed, his eyes bright with anticipation. Inspector Japp stood by the door, his arms crossed, a satisfied nod acknowledging Leonard Baxter's arrest the previous night. The air was thick with the weight of a case resolved, yet Poirot's presence demanded one final reckoning. "Mesdames," Poirot began, his voice smooth as a polished blade. "The tragedy of Dr. Reginald Hawthorne's death is solved. Yet Hercule Poirot owes you the truth in its entirety. The broken hourglass. It was not merely a relic, but the key to a crime of ambition and desperation. Let us lay bare the final piece of this puzzle. His green eyes, sharp as ever, swept over the women, noting Clara's clenched jaw and Evelyn's trembling hands. Hastings shifted, whispering, "Baxter's confessed, Poirot. What's left to explain? He's our man." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile betraying his satisfaction. "Oui, Hastings, but understanding is as vital as justice. The how and why must be clear, for the sake of all who remain." He turned to Clara and Evelyn, pacing slowly. "Doctor, Hawthorne, a scholar of relentless precision, uncovered a forgery in the Ashbourne Museum's prized Venetian goblet, authenticated by Monsieur Baxter. The hourglass, with its Tyrian purple pigment, was his proof, a relic tied to the goblet's deceit. He confronted Baxter, threatening exposure. This, mesdames, was the spark of murder." Clara's eyes narrowed, her voice sharp. "Baxter's greed killed Reginald then. My disputes with him were academic, nothing more. I told you I was in the library." Poirot inclined his head. "Indeed, Madame Wentworth, your alibi holds, though your proximity to the study raised questions. Your anger at Hawthorne's plagiarism charge was real, but it was not your hand that struck." Evelyn, her voice barely a whisper, spoke up. "I heard them arguing, Mr. Poirot. Mr. Baxter sounded so angry. I was so frightened I hid in the garden." Poirot's gaze softened. "Oui, Mademoiselle Marsh. Your fear led you to conceal the truth, but your sketch and your words helped uncover it. You placed Baxter at the scene, arguing over the goblet's ruinous secret." Poirot turned to the fireplace, its embers glowing faintly. "Let us reconstruct, mes amis. Baxter, desperate to protect his reputation, entered the study after the lecture. Hawthorne, writing a letter to the museum, waved a letter opener in his agitation. In a moment of panic, Baxter seized it, striking fatally. He smashed the hourglass to scatter the damning pigment, hoping to erase its link to the goblet. The frame, too bulky to destroy quickly, he hid behind a cabinet in his office. The knife he tossed through the unlatched window into the rose garden, where Inspector Japp found it. Japp nodded, his voice gruff. Blood on the blade, Hawthorne's type. The glove with Baxter's oil, the frame with his pigment, it all tied him up neat as a bow. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Précisément, Inspector. The window, left unlatched, was his exit. He turned the key inside, climbed out and closed it, leaving the study locked. A simple trick, but effective, until the little gray cells unraveled it. Clara leaned forward, her tone grudgingly curious. "And the pigment? How did it lead you to Baxter?" Poirot's smile was modest. "The Tyrian purple, madame, is rare, used in forgeries to mimic age. Hawthorne's notes and the hourglass sand revealed it. The goblet, authenticated by Baxter, bore the same pigment. His motive was clear. Exposure would end his career. The frame, hidden in haste, bore his traces. Blood, oil, pigment. His denial crumbled under the weight of truth." Evelyn's eyes widened. "So the hourglass was proof of the forgery? That's why he broke it?" Poirot nodded. "Oui, mademoiselle. The hourglass was Hawthorne's evidence, its sand a silent accuser. Baxter destroyed it to hide his crime, but the sand spoke to Hercule Poirot." Hastings grinned, rising from his chair. "Another triumph, Poirot. You've outdone yourself, old man." Poirot's expression sobered, his voice low. "Non, Hastings. It is no triumph when a life is lost. Baxter's ambition betrayed him, as the hourglass betrayed his forgery. Justice is served, but the cost is heavy. He turned to Clara and Evelyn, his tone gentle but firm. Madame, mademoiselle, you are free of suspicion. Your secrets, anger, fear, were but shadows in this crime. Return to your lives, but remember, the past, like time, always catches up. Clara nodded stiffly, her pride intact, while Evelyn wiped her eyes, relief softening her features. As the women left, Japp clapped Poirot on the shoulder. "You've done it again, Poirot. I'll wrap up the paperwork on Baxter. Care for a pint at the village pub?" Poirot shuddered delicately. "Non, Inspector. I prefer my coffee, but I thank you." Japp chuckled and departed, leaving Poirot and Hastings alone. Hastings gathered his notebook, shaking his head. "The hourglass, the goblet, the frame. You saw it all, Poirot. How do you do it?" Poirot adjusted his hat, his smile enigmatic. "The little gray cells, mon ami. They see the pattern where others see chaos. The final piece is always there, waiting to be found." As they stepped into the crisp morning air, the manor's clock struck 10, its chimes a solemn farewell. The case of the broken hourglass was closed, its secrets laid bare by the relentless mind of Hercule Poirot.